John Ratcliffe, a House representative from Texas tapped by President Trump to replace Dan Coats as the Director of National Intelligence, has a reputation as a staunch conservative who has come to the president's defense. He did so most recently last week at the hearing in which Robert S. Mueller III, the former special counsel, appeared. Mr. Ratcliffe sharply questioned Mr. Mueller, accusing him of not following Justice Department guidelines after Mr. Mueller said he could not exonerate the president of obstruction of justice charges. If a special counsel cannot bring charges, Mr. Ratcliffe argued, he should not presume to say a target was not cleared. So, Americans need to know this as they listen to the Democrats and Socialists on the other side of the aisle as they do dramatic readings from this report, Mr. Ratcliffe said of the part of Mr. Mueller's report that described how the president sought to impede the investigation, adding that section of the report was not authorized under the law to be written. On Sunday morning, Mr. Ratcliffe said on Fox News that Democrats accused Donald Trump of a crime, and then they try and reverse engineer a process to justify that accusation. I'm not going to accuse any specific person of any specific crime, I just want there to be a fair process to get there, he added. What I do know, as a former federal prosecutor, is that it does appear that there were crimes committed during the Obama administration. The relationship between Mr. Trump and intelligence officials has been strained during Mr. Coats's 2-year tenure. Mr. Coats has at times clashed with the president and taken issue with Mr. Trump's assertions about Russian interference. Mr. Trump announced on Sunday that he intended to nominate Mr. Ratcliffe as Mr. Coats's successor. A former U.S. attorney, John will lead and inspire greatness for the country he loves, he said on Twitter. Mr. Coats will leave the position on August 15, and an acting director will be named shortly, the president said. Dan Coats's departure removes one of the most prominent figures willing to contradict President Trump. If nominated and confirmed by the Senate, Mr. Ratcliffe, 53, would become the sixth person to serve as the Director of National Intelligence, a position that was created recently, told the New York Times of his time with Mr. Trump in New York. But when it came to prominent people of color, he added, I always sensed he was not comfortable being around us. He reminded me what he was, a Queens guy. He saw us as entertainers or athletes that he had to do business with. He noted that Mr. Trump did not surround himself with people of color in his business before becoming president. I've never seen a black exec in Trump organization, Mr. Sharpton said. As somebody who has been involved in civil rights for decades, he is one of the few major figures that I've never seen a black on his C-suite. That takes effort in a city 2/3 black and brown. Mr. Sharpton has his own complicated history when it comes to race. He was an outspoken activist through a string of racially charged episodes in New York in the 1980s and 1990s, and was regarded in that era alternately as a champion of social justice or a self-promoting provocateur. He drew broad criticism as one of the most vocal supporters of Tawana Brawley, an African-American teenager whose claims of abuse and rape by a gang of white men in 1987 were eventually exposed as a hoax. Mr. Sharpton has reinvented himself over the years as a more measured and more mainstream national voice on civil rights and social justice, and he ran unsuccessfully for president in 2004. His National Action Network has become a force on the political left, and even Mr. Trump twice attended its conventions. Indeed, he cut the ribbon at the 2002 gathering. Mr. Sharpton on Monday posted a picture of himself with Mr. Trump. A Trump at NAN Convention 2006 telling James Brown and Jesse Jackson why he respects my work. Different tune now. The flare-up with Mr. Sharpton came after Mr. Trump assailed Mr. Cummings over the weekend, saying the congressman should spend less time criticizing the president's handling of detained migrants at the southwestern border and more time fixing his disgusting, rat and rodent-infested district where no human being would want to live. The attack generated a cascade of responses from critics who said the president was playing to racist stereotypes. Mr. Sharpton announced that he would appear in Baltimore on Monday with Michael Steele, the former Republican National Committee chairman and Maryland lieutenant governor who himself is black, to decry the president's remarks. Mr. Trump evidently noticed. Al Sharpton would always ask me to go to his events, he wrote as part of his Twitter blast on Monday morning. He would say, it is a personal favor to me seldom, but sometimes, I would go. It was fine. He came to my office in TT during the presidential campaign to apologize for the way he was talking about me. Just a conman at work, eh? He went after Mr. Cummings again as well. Baltimore, under the leadership of Elijah Cummings, has the worst crime statistics in the nation, Mr. Trump wrote. 25 years of all talk, no action. So tired of listening to the same old bull. Next, Reverend Al will show up to complain and protest. Nothing will get done for the people in need. Sad, eh? In a phone interview with MSNBC after Mr. Trump's initial attack on him on Monday morning, Mr. Sharpton attributed it to the re-election politics of 2020. He's going to attack the most visible black that comes across his desk that he thinks can set a tone, Mr. Sharpton said. We need to stand up and deal with the fact that this president's policies hurt people all over this country.